what you think of as Europe's refugee crisis is a lie. The amount of people who have arrived on this continent's shores in the past year make up 0.029% of Europe's total population. 0.029%. And you see, I have a problem with the word crisis. I think it's an excuse. I think it makes us think that we can do no better. It makes it okay to tear gas teenagers on the borders of Macedonia, or trade humans like cargo between Turkey and Greece. It makes us think that this is the best we can do. So is it? Is this the best we can do? The first time that I went to volunteer in the refugee camp in Calais was nearly 2 years ago. When I came back, people often asked me, they said, "What was the most shocking thing that you experienced?" And they think that I will say something that I saw in the camp. I don't. For me, the most shocking part of that entire trip was just the moment that I arrived back home. I sat down in my kitchen and I opened up a newspaper article about the migrants of Calais. And I just started to read the comments underneath. Over and over again. I couldn't stop myself. Comments made by people who had no idea of the things that I had just seen. Cowards. Ruined their country, and now they've come to ruin ours. Brave enough to fight the French, but not brave enough to fight in their own land. But can I tell you who I met there in that camp? I met a maths teacher from Sudan. I met a 17-year-old boy from Eritrea, whose entire family had been killed by Islamic State militants in Libya en route, and yet who had still fought on, and still believed in this dream that one day he could live his life in safety and in peace. I met a librarian from Afghanistan who gave out free tea. And I met a 7-year-old girl called Narika who gave me a friendship bracelet and told me we were Farsi sisters. I met people who needed papers or an education, some kindness or an opportunity, but I did not meet one person who did not have something that they wanted to give back. You see, the style of thinking that the authors of those comments unfortunately possess, it actually limits us all. It limits the asylum seeker to that one-dimensional character featured in sensationalist newspaper articles. And it limits my country. Because instead of seeing a man fluent in 4 languages, we see a dirty migrant sleeping in the rough of a French port. What we fail to see is that this is a temporary state. When we use words like refugee, asylum seeker, migrant, we fail to see beyond that. Refugee does not say, "Look, I was once a doctor," or "I will become a human rights lawyer." It does not say, "I am clever enough to develop the theory of relativity." as Einstein, himself a refugee, once famously did. Being a refugee does not mean that you are incompetent or that you are unable to do something for yourself. It means that you are resilient. Actually, the only thing that it always means is that you have overcome something unimaginable. To have outsmarted bombs and hunger, survived a sea that has claimed the lives of 2,925 people in 2017 alone. To face racism and disgust and comments like those. I admire, more than that, I am in awe. I am in awe of the bravery that these kinds of decisions demand from a person. Nobody wants to be a refugee. Nobody wants to sit in a foreign country and talk about their home in the past tense. But we are beyond naive if we think that this could never again happen to us. The right to claim asylum is the most sacred thing. It's the most incredible thing that we have ever created. To think that I, or that you, or that my children, or that your grandchildren will always be able to live their life in safety if ever the tables are turned. That's revolutionary. Do you know what that says to warfare? That says war. You are nothing. Because the second you become too much, we can just get up and leave. I am so frustrated by the way that we continue to abuse the right to claim asylum. I get that it's not easy. A child who has languished 7, 10, 12 years in a camp in Lebanon does not see the world in the same way as yours truly, a starry-eyed only child from Wales. But can't you see that every day spent in that transit camp only exaggerates the differences between us? It only adds more to the common problems of humanity. Can't you see that for every refugee child who does not receive an education, the entire world has lost out? I told you that Europe's refugee crisis is a lie. But there is a crisis on a far bigger scale, and I can tell you what that is. It's the lack of doctors in my country, in Britain, and the sheer waste of the fact that there are hundreds of doctors idly wasting away in camps across Europe and the Middle East. The crisis is the fact that these two parallels exist, and we resolutely do not believe in bridging them. The crisis is the fact that there are thousands of teachers just waiting for papers, waiting for their lives to begin again. And at the same time, education becomes more and more inaccessible to those who one day will be required to build their countries up from the rubble the bombs have left behind. The crisis is the fact that it is practically impossible to legally claim asylum from some of the richest countries in the world. That is the crisis. It is so easy to hate and fear people you do not know. That is the easiest thing to do in the world. It's only when you begin to get to know a person, to understand them, and to relate to them, then you cannot hate and you cannot label, and you cannot be afraid. Would you believe me if I told you that the closest feeling I have had to home since living in the Netherlands actually came from having dinner with a Syrian family? Or that I trained on a team of Olympic athletes and never once knew one as determined or as inspiring as a refugee? The thing is, you shouldn't believe me. Believing me is not enough. You should go out there and experience this for yourself. Because the real antidote to Europe's refugee crisis, it's you. It's the way in which you stop repeating those two words over and over again. It's the way in which you stop believing them. It's you, the university lecturer, offering more scholarships to refugees. It's you, the resident, swapping Dutch lessons for hummus and stories about things that you couldn't even imagine. It's you, the student, making more friends, harnessing that opportunity to learn something about a culture that is not your own. It's you, each and every one of you, leaving this room today and no longer feeling indifferent. Because when you start to realize that this crisis is made up of individuals, you will see that we cannot continue to blind ourselves to it. Those human rights abuses happening because we have been manipulated into thinking that there is no other option. Speak out against them. I am telling you, there is another option.